This review is for a mature rated game and discusses mature themes. Viewer discretion is advised. Issues such as mental health aren't normally the main focus of a work of fiction, let alone a video game. Games such as the psychological horror game Silent Hill 2 may have looked at depression at least a little bit, and other games surely have depressing moments or endings. But the indie game The Cat Lady, designed by Ren Michalski and developed by Harvester Games, essentially makes this topic the main focus, and is part of a heavily story-driven psychological horror adventure experience. Meet the main character and playable protagonist, Susan Ashworth. She is a middle-aged woman who lives in a flat in the UK. She is chronically depressed, hates flowers and company, and feeds stray cats in the neighbourhood when they hear her piano, a habit that leads to her being known by her mostly apathetic neighbours as the Cat Lady. When she takes her own life, she ends up in some other place, where she meets the so-called Queen of Maggots. Who exactly is she? Death? The devil? Whatever her identity, she gives Susan the unwanted power of immortality and sends her back to the world of the living, with the pressure of accomplishing a dangerous task. Soon after, Susan meets the young Mitzi, who, despite Susan's preference to be alone, gradually helps her on her journey. This journey consists of a number of chapters that are partially told in a non-linear fashion. Throughout the game, there is backstory on Susan's depression, some of which is completely up to the player's choices, as well as interactions with Mitzi and a number of other interesting characters. But what is hard to not notice is the surrealism and the psychological horror that dominate the story. This is psychological horror that is not so much scary, but freaky and unsettling, with blood or gore that tends to be used more effectively than in a number of other horror films. Sometimes, when exploring, you will suddenly go into a room that wasn't there, or the walls might even close in on Susan. That can be comparable to films such as Jacob's Ladder, or even the works of David Lynch. But make no mistake, no matter the surprising little bits of humour, or the sassiness of the leading characters, the depression is prevalent throughout. There's even one memorable scene where Susan has to be careful about what daily mundane tasks she has to do and how she does them, depending on the player's quick or ponderous actions. No matter how much you know about depression, or even suffer from or deal with it, it is hard not to relate on some level. It is a sad, emotional story.
Most days, it's enough of a struggle to crawl out of bed. I don't see the point in anything. I just want to disappear. And I hate everyone else because they know how to be happy. Everywhere I turn, there are people filled with hope and will to live. Or people so pitiful, they make me ashamed to be alive. I don't want them. There's nobody there for me. I am alone. I just want to vanish.
The psychological horror, the surrealism, the disturbing terrors, it is brought to life with such a unique, stylish aesthetic. The best part are the foregrounds and backgrounds of a variety of settings that look almost photo-like, a contrast to the 2D-like character models that walk around and move their mouths in a similar fashion to the old point-and-click adventure games, like the Monkey Island and Day of the Tentacle games. A nice callback. The foregrounds and backgrounds tend to be in a black and white aesthetic, but with certain details drawn in usually symbolic colours. Most of the time, there's a red colour for blood. But the foregrounds and backgrounds change, the lighting shifts, key details drop in and out of focus, or zoom in and out, or twirl, or are replaced by something more inexplicable or horrifying or threatening. It is all effective in potentially messing with the player's mind. The soundtrack is terrific, consisting of original music composed by Ren Michalski's brother that feature anything ranging from solemn piano melodies to distorted electronic guitars, not to mention some licensed music. This hauntingly beautiful music score really adds to this game's artistic merit, though it does clash with the sound effects and voice acting some of the time. The sound effects seem to do more than get the job done. In fact, there are moments when there is little to no music, and anything so much as creaky floorboards or doors can affect the player. And as for the voice acting, it is generally good, though it can be stilted a fair amount of the time, as well as come across as not being recorded properly depending on who's doing the voice acting.
A kind man had described to me what you look like, and what can I say? It was spot on.
What do you want?
The best way to describe the gameplay of The Cat Lady would be to compare it to the aforementioned point-and-click adventure games, but without the word point. You only use the arrow keys and enter with escape to save, load and quit. That's it. You move Susan left and right with the up key to interact with someone or something she's next to, with the down key to use an item in your inventory. You have to walk around, talk with characters, or interact with items on screen, usually with your inventory items, in order to finish the game. While this might sound simplistic, don't be fooled. As with a lot of adventure games from over the years, the puzzles make things tricky. Susan's use of immortality is more than just an aspect of the story. It prevents you from dying and restarting the save or game as a result. It just sends you back some rooms, to be sure. Whether it's figuring out the name of someone's mother, or bringing over something such as blood from a spider heart, from some other dimension, or reality, or whatever you want to call it, or going everywhere possible to look for an item to use in a certain spot, the puzzles are mostly engaging, and are either clever, stumping, or full of trial and error in equal measure. When you're not looking for items or solving puzzles, you will be talking a lot. Much of the conversations will consist of you choosing every possible dialogue option in the dialogue tree to advance through the game. While much of the conversations are mostly well written for the sake of the story, some of these scenes go on for way too long sometimes. Though you can skip lines with spacebar if you want. Metal Gear Solid series, eat your heart out. Still, even with the dialogue length, this is a pretty short game, taking roughly 8 hours to complete, perhaps more if you really get stuck. But there is replay value in the dialogue choices of fitting at least Susan's backstory, which is not noticeable or completely game-changing, and for multiple endings to see. The best ending is fairly hard to get without a guide, for it's apparently not the canonical ending in regards to the other games from the same designer. There appear to be references to those games here, but it seems like you can play the Cat Lady first without worrying about that. The Cat Lady is not necessarily a game to enjoy or have fun with. There are some objectively noticeable problems that should have been fixed, such as the occasional performance issues on most computers and bugs that seem to affect puzzles. In fact, there was a moment in Chapter 4 where the villain in a doorway seemed to make it impossible to get an important item unless a previous save, with the same name, was loaded. And speaking of the villains, they tend to come across as one-dimensional. That, combined with the aforementioned lengthy conversation scenes, and even moments that mostly lacking clarity regardless of subjective interpretations or symbolism, means that the story is not necessarily close to near perfection. But the main reason the game is not meant to put a smile on your face is obviously the subject matter. That's the subjective thing. It is up to you, the player, how you react to or interpret it, or if you would prefer to play something more lighthearted or less horrifying. But it definitely makes for the game being a work of art, and an emotional one at that. By the time the game ends, it is likely you will have felt emotion when it comes to the seemingly impossible tasks Susan has to accomplish, and maybe get a sense of positivity, purpose, and hope during the rolling of the end credits. If you're up for some psychological horror, or some mostly old school adventure gaming, or perhaps relate to or understand mental health for yourself, you may want to try out The Cat Lady. It's on GOG or Good Old Games, or Steam, the latter of which has achievements, such as insulting a neighbour? Well, there's that life gone. The cats have more.